Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to be talking about the book Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. So Brene Brown is a very well-known author in the world of education and lots of other places as well, but I'm in education and that's how I've heard of her. And Atlas of the Heart is exactly what it sounds like. It was like an atlas that showed you all of the emotions of the heart. And so she really took a deep dive into what every emotion that humans experience are like. So she starts off the book by saying that she asked people, what emotions can you identify when you are feeling them? And most people said 3. It was like sad, glad, mad. Those were the main 3 emotions that people could identify. And she goes on to say, well, there are actually 87 emotions that we can experience. So I'll put those here. So each chapter of the book was called Places We Go When We Feel Blank. And then she listed the emotions that we were going to talk about. And so I actually listened to her audiobook, which I highly recommend. She's a great speaker. And I usually don't like audiobooks. The only other audiobook I would ever recommend to people is the Matthew McConaughey one, but she actually did a really great job too. So I have them all listed right here, and so you can look at that, but I don't want to spend a long time going over all of them. As I was listening to her audiobook, I took my own notes of the key takeaways that I thought were super important. Also, I like how on Audible you can clip certain sections of the book to go back and listen to again. But I also like to take notes. So I took notes on what I thought was important. And the first thing that I thought was important is overall, she talked about the importance of language. And she gave this analogy where she said, if you go to the doctor and your mouth is taped shut and you can't tell them where your pain is, how are you supposed to tell them how you're feeling or where your pain is? Language is so important. And she said that it is so vital that we all understand our emotions and are able to express them with people. So I thought that that was really cool, just how important our language is. And we have language, why don't we use it? We need to communicate with others and let them know how we're feeling. Another point that she hit on that I thought was really cool is she said, or I thought it was very interesting. She said that we have to have a knowledge or a connection to something to be curious about it. And that was something that after I heard it, I was like, well, duh. But looking back on it, I'm like, well, yeah, that's why a lot of things that other people may be super into, I'm not as into. And so it's just something to keep in the back of your head that you might not feel that same connection to something as somebody else, but you can understand their connection to it. Another point that she made is how surprise can intensify an emotion, which I thought was very interesting because I've never thought about that, but it's so true. So for example, if you're going to a restaurant thinking, oh, this isn't gonna be really good, and it was good, you say, oh, that was surprisingly good. Then in your head, you are going to forever have a memory of that restaurant being surprisingly good, better than it actually was because you had low expectations. And so she says that surprise can intensify an emotion. So I thought that that was pretty cool. I think that the emotion in the book that kind of took me by surprise because I hadn't ever thought about it was complicated grief. And so this was something that I felt a connection to because somebody in my life has experienced this and I haven't. So I haven't been able to experience and fully feel that raw emotion. So to hear her talk about it was something that was really interesting, and I really paid attention for this part. And it was when she mentioned complicated grief. And so I ended up looking it up more, and I found out that complicated grief is not just being sad of the loss of somebody close to you. It goes way deeper and it can last for months. It can be something that is pushed down and then later comes out. It is something that can lead to mental health issues. And she said that it is intense sorrow and it could make the person who's experiencing this emotion become delusional and have a thought like, oh, maybe they'll come back, or have not clear thinking. And so that was an emotion that really took me by surprise, just because I had never experienced or really heard of it. So hearing her talk about it kind of opened my eyes to that one. Another point that she made was talking about healthy striving versus perfectionism. So I think that a lot of people will say that they are perfectionists, and in reality, they are healthy striving. It's something that is good for them or will benefit them, that is not like an OCD driving them crazy type of thing. So after hearing her talk about that, it makes me less likely to say, oh, I'm a perfectionist in the future, and to think this is healthy striving. So that was something that can kind of change your mindset, change your language to be something that is more healthy, because perfectionism is not a healthy trait to have. When Brene Brown was talking about loneliness, she said that for some reason in our society, lonely is something that is pitied. Like, people say, you poor thing, you're lonely. And really, it's an emotion that everybody is going to feel, and it shouldn't really be acknowledged as, oh, you poor thing. It should be like, oh, you're lonely? Let's go make it better. Come here, let's hang out. And she said that this statistic blew my mind. It says that loneliness can reduce your lifespan up to 45%. Just by being lonely. So it really showed me the importance of surrounding yourself with good people, of having family, friends, people there for you, so that you have somebody to call when you're lonely. The next note that I took was a quote from the book, and it says, it's about people who, this is when she started to talk about love and brokenheartedness, and she said, the brokenhearted are the bravest among us, they dared to love. And I just really loved that quote. The next note that I took was about betrayal, and it stated how if you have betrayed somebody, there are three things that you need to do to feel better and hopefully move on from that if it's causing you any guilt. And that is that you need accountability, amends, and action. So you need to acknowledge the pain and trauma that you've caused somebody in a betrayal in order to move on. In another example, she was talking about getting into heated arguments with people, and she said this thing, and I could so relate to it. She said, I've never had to apologize for asking for a break, like a timeout from an argument or a fight, but I've regretted every time that I haven't, because it goes on to say things you don't really mean or to make it even worse. So she said, call timeouts when you're flooded with emotion during fights, which I think is really good advice. Along these same lines, she also said, when we respond to hurt feelings with anger, so if somebody hurt your feelings and you are angry to them, your response is going to be anger back. You can't fight anger and get the response you want. You're going to get anger in return. So she was just talking about advice when getting into heated discussions or fights. And while she was talking about this quote came up that, well, as she was on the same subject of anger, a quote came up that I thought was very powerful. And it says, anger is a catalyst. It's an emotion that we need to transform into something life-giving. Courage, love, change, compassion, and justice. So she was saying, like, when it comes to politics and things like that, if you get anger, that's totally fine, but that needs to be your catalyst for a new emotion. You can't just stay angry. And I really like that perspective. Next, she started talking about gratitude, and I loved everything she was saying about gratitude. I went out and I bought a gratitude journal as soon as I listened to this section. So she was talking about how practicing joy creates an upward spiral. So instead of like a downward spiral where you feel negative, 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 you can start to feel more positive by practicing gratitude. So her quote was, instead of adapting to goodness, we can celebrate goodness. It helps us feel connected to others around us, and gratitude is a practice that everybody can participate in every single day, like how I'm going to with a gratitude journal. The next point was she was going on to talk about dehumanization, and she was saying that the way that dehumanization works is that we can compare people to something that triggers a disgust feeling in us. So for example, if you say that a group of people is like cockroaches, that will literally make people disgusted, and it dehumanizes and takes away from that person. So I thought that that was something that you just really want to watch your words around, you know, comparing other people. I don't think most people do this, that I know at least, but it kind of showed like, wow, people can take their power and try to dehumanize by giving characteristics of something that literally triggers disgust. The next point is that hate is fueled by our need for connection. So I thought this was really interesting. She was saying that people don't just hate people. People want to connect with others, and kind of like how we've seen in politics, they will all have a common hate towards something. So they all have this false sense of belonging and think that they all belong together because they all have the same ideologies. So that was an interesting point. The next one that I thought was such good advice for any parents or people who work with kids at all, or just who want to connect with people, is she talks about striving to walk alongside people, not controlling or directing them. And so what she means by that is that when somebody tells you their story, you walk with them, you listen to them, you hear them out. You don't just try to give them advice. And she gives an example of her kid misbehaving in school. And she says, like, I immediately want to tell him, oh my gosh, go send an email to your teacher. You were so wrong. But I needed to take a step back and be like, how are you feeling? What did this do to you? Like, and then be like, now do you see your teacher's side? Like, walk alongside them, hear them out. She ends the book talking about connection. That's ultimately what the goal of this book is. And she says that we can only connect with others when we ask them how they are feeling. I loved that she said this also because it was like a full circle ending. She brought language back into it and said, we need to hear them out. We need to ask them how they're feeling because we can't assume that we know. So she said that we also need to trust their story when they tell us. So she said that people earn the right to hear somebody's story that they share with you about their emotions. And also, when we're the listener, we have to trust what those people are saying. So I thought that this point was so important because we earn the right to hear somebody's story, and we have to respect them by trusting what they tell us, how they felt, what they went through, what they experienced, because we all come from different backgrounds and we all deal with emotion differently. And so I thought that was such a cool point and something that really, really stuck with me in this book. And she said that a lot of the times when we hear people telling their story, something that's emotion filled or something that has caused them trauma, a lot of the time we try to be problem solvers, or we immediately try to be positive, or we try to just fix the situation. And she said sometimes the answer is just to say, thank you for telling me. What do you need from me? How can I support you? Is there anything you need? And that's something that really stuck with me because I feel like when people have told me things, sometimes I do try to be a problem solver and just be like, how can we fix this? I want you to be happy. And really, sometimes the answer is just being there and saying, thank you for sharing that with me. If there's any way I can help you, let me know. And then she ended the book with a quote that really stuck with me that says, our connection with others can only be as deep as our connection with ourselves. We need to completely understand who we are, what we want, our everything, ourselves. If we don't understand ourselves, we can't connect it with other people. And I thought that was so powerful because it's really about like the cliche of loving yourself before you can love somebody else, right? You need to know who you are to share that with somebody else, because if you don't know who you are, what are they connecting with, right? And so this book overall was something that was really great to listen to as an audiobook. It was awesome, and I feel like I definitely learned a lot about emotion and the different types of emotion, all 87 of them, and the best way to go about, you know, navigating somebody's heart and trying to be there for them. So if you get a chance to check this book out, I highly recommend it. I really want to read more Brene Brown books. If you follow my channel at all, you know that I love to read, so I will definitely be listening to more of her books. But thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something. I obviously had a lot to learn from this book. Go ahead and please like and subscribe. That would really help me out. Thank you so much. Wherever you are, I hope that you are all healthy and safe, and I will see you all on my next adventure or in the next book video. Bye guys.